Pokemon being one of Nintendo's largest franchises, you've likely heard of the different challenges and speedruns that players undertake for bragging rights and world records. Speedruns have the goal of beating the game as fast as possible, and there's one major thing runners have to deal with: RNG. A streak of variants can end the run or take you to world record level heights, with each attempt being a unique challenge. But what if you could get perfect RNG? What would the run look like then? A group of people set out on a journey to answer that, and what they found had them question everything they thought they knew about speedrunning Pokemon. This is the history of tool-assisted speedruns for Pokemon Red and Blue glitchless. Your first question may be, what exactly is a tool-assisted speedrun? And it's quite simple. A tool-assisted speedrun, or TAS, is a set of pre-recorded inputs beginning from when a game powers on. You can think of it like piano roll for a piano player. This allows the person creating the TAS to have buttons pressed frame perfectly in every situation they encounter, which means there is no possibility of lost time due to a missed input. A TAS is perfection in execution. So let's see how this is applied to Pokemon, starting almost a decade ago. The first TAS we're looking at was made sometime in the early 2010s by Japanese runner Aruka, and as you know, every Pokemon game begins with a choice, but in this case there's only one: Squirtle. We'll get to why he's important in just a bit, as the first thing we need to do is manipulate his stats. There's a bit of math involved in calculating stats, but all we really need to know is that the HP stat is determined by the values of the other stats, with odd-numbered stats giving bonuses to a Pokemon's starting health. All of the values are generated by RNG, and for Pokemon, the RNG begins when the game starts, with it increasing every frame. But luckily for us, it has two characteristics we can take advantage of. It's deterministic, and pressing buttons causes the RNG values to change. Deterministic means that if you turn the game on and make a string of inputs, then repeat this process with the same inputs, you will have the same RNG values. With this level of predictability, it's only a matter of finding the inputs that generate the best stats or desired outcomes and putting them together to create our starter Squirtle. To get Squirtle's stats in the correct place, you have some text boxes to clear while talking to Professor Oak, and we should talk about text boxes since there are lots of them in the run. Text is printed out one character at a time in Pokemon, so for things like names, it's best to use a single character so you're not losing time to text being printed. Clearing the text box requires a single button press, but how they're cleared is interesting, so here's a famous analogy involving a bus. Text boxes have a window of 3 frames to be cleared as fast as possible, with the next box not being loaded until the last frame of that window has passed. This means that if you press the button on frame 1, you still have to wait until frame 3 for the box to clear. The timing of clearing these text boxes has an additional feature we should look at: print letter delay. By varying different combinations of A and B mashing as text prints, print letter delay can ever so slightly change the timing of some under-the-hood systems, including RNG. This is used extensively in Gen 1 Pokemon TASes and starts as early as Squirtle, with an added bonus of being able to trick the game into lowering the frame window for text boxes, allowing buses sometimes to leave early. Another frame window trick runners use is double input, which comes in handy for certain menus. The game can't tell the difference between a button held for 2 frames and a button pressed on 2 consecutive frames, so typically you have to release a button for a frame in order to get another press to register. With double input, however, you're able to hold down a button and then press another input, such as a direction on the D-pad, to have the game recognize the button you were holding as being pressed again. This is handy for the item menu especially, as you don't waste frames pressing a button, then waiting a frame before you can press it again. So with our text cleared and RNG manipulated for Squirtle, we're ready to head out. But what's next? While Squirtle is great for clearing Brock due to his type advantage, he encounters problems later in the run since his evolutions aren't able to deal with tankier Pokemon due to a low damage moveset and base stats. Fortunately for us, there's a patch of grass just west of Viridian City on Route 22 that contains a very special Pokemon, Nidoran. and we're going to use something called dsum to encounter one with stats perfect for our task. As with stat generation for Pokemon, the runners have figured out how random encounters work, and it turns out they aren't all that random. By looking at the equations that determine when an encounter happens and which Pokemon it will generate, it was discovered that the game is cycling through the list of possible Pokemon for any given area. Once this was solved, there were 3 additional requirements to optimize the encounter for speed. It needs to happen on the first patch of grass, the Nidoran needs to be caught on the first Pokeball, and it needs to have good stats. All of this is of course possible with the same manipulation techniques that were used for Squirtle, and for Aruka's task, he actually waits for the RNG to advance on its own for a few cycles before moving into the bush. Nidoran won't see any action until Brock, as we need to level up Squirtle for Bubble so the match proceeds as fast as possible. But the fight itself has a lot going on, so let's take a look. Despite the fact that Squirtle has a type advantage, you're not able to one-shot Geodude or Onix by using Bubble, even with a critical hit. So an RNG seed was found where you hit Geodude with Bubble, manipulate his tackle to miss, and then finish him off. Onix starts off the same, his tackle is forced to miss, then a critical hit is used to take him down to 1 HP. This is to set up Nidoran for the kill, as Squirtle gets KO'd, which allows Nidoran to finish the fight and receive full experience from Onix. You may be wondering why a level 3 Nidoran was chosen when Route 22 has a level 4 available, and this is due to how level ups work in Generation 1. When the level 3 Nidoran gets experience from the Onix fight, it reaches level 8, which is also the level that it learns Horn Attack. If the level 4 Nidoran is taken, it will reach level 9 from the Onix fight, and due to how level ups work in Generation 1, if you gain a bunch of levels at once, the game only recognizes that you've arrived at the highest level obtained, so any moves you would learn at the levels in between are skipped. That's a lot of work just to set up one Pokemon, so you might be wondering why Nidoran, and the answers are quite convincing. He can be evolved very quickly into Nidoking, as there is a Moonstone in the next area. His stats are generally higher than anything you encounter early game, and perhaps most importantly, it has a large pool of moves that it can learn. Why a bipedal rhino can learn Thunderbolt and Bubble Beam is anyone's guess, but it gives him great versatility when it comes to dealing with Pokemon he doesn't have a natural type advantage over. Any problem these moves don't solve is taken care of by Thrash, which he learns normally, and Horndrill, a one-hit KO learned from a TM. A good place to observe this is the rocket hideout under Celadon City, where you need to pick up the Sylph Scope so you can proceed through Lavender Tower. The rocket grunts in this area have lots of Pokemon that share a type with Nidoking, which means that Thrash won't kill some of them in one hit. Instead, Thunderbolt is used to take out a few of the Ekans, and for the tougher Sandslash, we dip into Horndrill, which normally has a 30% chance to hit, but through Manip Magic, it will never miss in this playthrough. It is important to conserve PP for the knockout moves, as restoring PP is costly on time, and for the rocket hideout, we need at least 3 uses for Giovanni, as his Pokemon are all too tough for any other move to dispatch them in one hit. As far as the battles go, the rest of the run has Nidoking acting as a juggernaut. Thrash will be dropped for Fissure late game so that he has access to 2 instant kills, with Bubble Beam and Thunderbolt being used to cover a wide range of type advantages. The route has lots of optimizations aside from Nidoran. You buy a bunch of escape ropes in Pewter City, which will be used to warp from indoor locations to the last Pokemon Center you used, so you don't have to backtrack. Using Pokemon Centers costs about 15 seconds, so you want to visit them as little as possible. And the only one used in this run is Cerulean's, which is a convenient warp location since it saves the walk back from Bill's house. Since HM moves are required for progression, they have their own considerations in the run. A Pidgey is caught just before the SS Ann for Fly. A Sandshrew for Cut is caught after Mount Moon, which leaves Squirtle for Surf, since we need a way to Cinnabar Island. We need to look at Celadon City since it has a lot going on, with the Fly HM, Erica's Gym, the department store, and the Rocket Hideout. There are some TMs and items we need at the department store, and the Rocket Hideout needs to be cleared so we can get the Sylph Scope to get through the Lavender Tower. So far, things haven't been done out of order, but Aruka doesn't do the Celadon Gym while he's here. Instead, he clears the Lavender Tower, then heads to Fuchsia City for Koga. Koga is routed ahead of Aruka for one reason. His badge gives a speed boost, which is necessary for outspeeding Pokemon in the late game. We'll see why the Soul Badge is so important later. For now, we head to Saffron to clear out Team Rocket from Silphco, then skip Sabrina and head right to Cinnabar Island to fight Blaine. Once he's defeated, it's time to circle back and clear out Aruka and Sabrina, which leaves Giovanni and the Elite Four to end the run. The final time on Aruka's TAS was 1:31:06, which was almost an hour faster than the RTA record back in 2012. This is where the TAS record would remain for almost a decade, with no one else entering the arena despite the huge explosion of popularity with speedrunning. That is, until TyKevin83 took a deeper look at the run. Kevin had created a handful of TAS runs for Pokemon Yellow, which has some big differences from Red and Blue version, enough that it's ran in a separate category. His curiosity got the better of him, and he started looking at an updated route of Aruka's TAS, and early on, he saw lots of minor improvements to be made. When you talk to Oak after getting the Pokeballs from Viridian, there is a small time save if you talk to him from the side instead of below, as Gary has to walk a shorter distance, which saves time over the extra steps you take to set this up. He also improved the Nidoran catch so that instead of waiting outside of the bush for a good RNG seed, you walk in and out of it once and get a Nidoran with stats that fit the run. But this manip led to a different problem. In Generation 1, a Pokemon's chance to crit is calculated with its base speed stat, and since Nidoran and Squirtle have low speed, this makes finding RNG where they can critical hit quite difficult. So difficult, in fact, that it took Kevin 6,000 attempts just to find a seed that got the crits necessary to get through Brock and the trainers leading into Mount Moon. Crits and damage require a bit of explanation, so here's the rundown. While moves have a base damage, there is a random number in the damage equation that means there is actually a range that their damage can fall on, with 39 different values being possible for any move. When it comes to critical hits, they're determined a bit differently. The game rolls a random number between 0 and 255, and then checks to see if the number rolled is less than half of the user's base speed. If it is lower, the move crits and deals about 2 times damage, so you can see why this makes generating crits with Squirtle and Nidoran a problem. Here's an example. This is the final trainer battle before Mount Moon, and Kevin has manipulated a non-crit horn attack with the Metapod using Harden. Since his defense is raised, this means a normal attack won't work. Luckily for us, in Generation 1, crits ignore stat changes, so by critting on the second attack, it does full damage, where a non-crit would have failed to defeat the Metapod, even with a max damage roll. You can see why it took 6,000 attempts now to find the RNG that would allow this to happen, since every attack needs to meet specific conditions. And if you press one button different in a previous section to try and find a better seed, everything after that button press is now altered, as the RNG it was mapped to has now been changed. Normally, a few frame improvements doesn't warrant a brand new TAS, as they're a lot of work to create. It's typically large discoveries that lead to a new one, and Kevin had a trick that would do just that. This is Instant Text. Found by Swaff back in 2015, Instant Text does exactly what it says. It prints all of the text contained in a box to the screen in a single frame, instead of printing it out letter by letter. To trigger Instant Text, all you need to do is talk to the bike shop owner in Cerulean without having the bike voucher, and press B while getting through the dialogue. Instant Text does come with some restrictions, as it will revert back to regular text if the player does any of the following: opens the start menu, heals at a Pokemon Center, loads a yes or no box, or speaks to the bike shop owner again. You might be thinking, this is a glitchless TAS, so why is something like this allowed? Instant Text doesn't corrupt the memory of the game, and it's viewed by the community more as a design oversight than an actual glitch like Missing No. On this route, Instant Text isn't activated until after Misty, despite it being available when you arrive in Cerulean, and for good reason. While it's active, you can't use print letter delay for technical reasons, which makes manipulating RNG very difficult. So while Misty is faster with Instant Text, it's too hard to manipulate while it's on. With Instant Text explained, let's look at the Cerulean route in full. The first stop is using the Poké Center to set the escape rope warp point, and then fight Misty. Instant Text gets enabled right after teaching Nidoking Bubble Beam, since that involves opening the menu, and it's used across the Nugget Bridge right up to the second to last trainer on the way to Bill. The reason it gets cancelled is because we learn Thrash while already knowing 4 moves, which triggers a yes-no box. It gets enabled once we warp back to Cerulean, and stays active until Cut is used to access Surge's gym. And since we just learned Thrash, it's time to take a look at this run's powerhouse move. Like every other move, it has a base damage and range that will be calculated when used. The special part is that when you select Thrash, it will be used for an additional 2 to 3 turns. This is great for 2 reasons. It saves seeing the text boxes on move selection. Plus, the number of extra turns can be manipulated, and the SSN rival fight is a great example. Gary has 4 Pokemon at this point, and instead of selecting a move on each turn, Kevin manipulates Thrash to last for 3 additional turns, with a crit on the final to kill the Ivysaur. You may be wondering why he took a critical quick attack at the beginning of the fight, and it's time we talked about Red Bar. Red Bar is a state that occurs when your Pokemon is at low health. In later generations, the bar itself turns red, but in the early games, it plays a siren sound. While Red Bar is active, it cancels death cries, saves 1 frame per text box clear, and effectively cancels level up jingles, as you're free to clear text and select moves instead of being forced to listen to the fanfare, which saves 2.5 seconds every time you level up while in Red Bar. Since Nidoran levels up 46 times in the run, that's 115 seconds of time save just from being in Red Bar, with the countless Pokemon defeated and text boxes cleared in battle adding up to another large time save over the run. When the rival fight starts on the SSN, Kevin intentionally takes damage to put himself deeper into Red Bar. Otherwise, Nidoking would heal himself out of it by the small amount of HP gained throughout the run by leveling. And we're now ready to look at the biggest change in the route, Lavender Town. After Surge, we escape rope back to Cerulean and then head to the underground tunnel on our way to Lavender Town. We don't need HM Flash since you don't require light to navigate the cave, but there is one particular fight that needs to be looked at, the Hiker. The Hiker has 3 Rock-type Pokemon, and leading up to this fight, we've used all of Bubble Beam's PP, which leaves us with Thunderbolt and Thrash, a move it's immune to, and one that won't deal much damage, so Kevin follows a brilliant strategy from Aruka's task. He opens with a Thunderbolt miss, and then he has all 3 Pokemon self-destruct. You're probably thinking, won't that just kill us and lose time reviving and switching Pokemon? The answer to that is no, because we take 0 damage from all 3 attacks. Due to how accuracy works in Gen 1, there is a chance that a move with a 100% hit rate will miss, so Kevin manipped all 3 Pokemon to use self-destruct with what is known as a Gen 1 miss. This saves their HP bar scrolling since self-destruct's own damage is instant and gives us experience for the fight since we're alive when they go down. Once clear of the tunnel, it's off to Celadon where Kevin has changed the item route. He buys duplicates of 2 items, so that the bag slot the item occupied persists after using them. This is to keep the inventory full, so that gym leaders can't give out TMs, which is a small time save over the remaining gyms in the run. The biggest change in Celadon, however, isn't the item menuing, it's the fact that the Pokédoll we just bought allows us to bypass the ghost in Lavender Tower, cutting out the entire Rocket hideout section, as we no longer need the Sylph Scope. For whatever reason, using the Pokédoll on the Lavender Ghost ends the fight. This was likely a developer oversight, and since it's not a hacked item, but one you obtain through legitimate means, it's allowed in the glitchless run. Aside from the Pokédoll, there's another new development in Lavender Town. We still haven't recovered the PP on Bubble Beam or any other move, and luckily, there's a healing pad here which restores both PP and HP, so the problem becomes, how do we get back to Red Bar? In Aruka's task, he fought the 2 trainers, then took Red Bar in the Marowak fight since he had the Sylph Scope, but we skipped doing that for the Pokédoll, so we don't have that option. Kevin came up with the solution of using a 4-turn Thrash against the first Ghastly, which he is immune to, and then tanking damage from 4 Nightshades. While this loses about 15 seconds, it ends up saving 37 seconds for a 22-second gain through to Koga's gym, which would be the next place you could gain Red Bar without sacrificing a huge amount of time. After Koga, there's a new problem. Since we skipped the Rocket hideout, we're lacking levels, and to mitigate this, we'll use a rare candy to boost our stats just a bit. This serves two purposes. It opens a bag slot so we can pick up the key in the Cinnabar Mansion, and it allows us to outspeed the rival's Alakazam in the Sylph building. This saves a full turn, and once again, we see the Pidgeot use Quick Attack for some red bar management, which is important, because the Gym Leader Rush poses a problem. This task keeps the same gym order, but Sabrina is an issue as the missing XP from the Rocket Hideout starts biting us in the butt. Her Alakazam will outspeed us, which means time loss, but Kevin had a plan to make the most of the situation. He manipulated a 4-turn Thrash on the first Kadabra, which means we won't be doing any other inputs for the rest of the fight. When the Alakazam arrives, he actually has him use a Psywave to take us exactly to 1 HP, and then manips a crit Thrash to get the kill on the first turn. The insane part about this is that the entire fight is set from the time he selects Thrash, which means the critical and damage from the Psywave need to be on the same RNG seed. The reason for doing this is because if we don't take precise damage here, we will heal out of red bar before the end of the run, but the manipulated Psywave manages our HP perfectly. TAS runs are typically all business, with very few liberties being taken, but on Victory Road, we see the coolest trick in the run, Swag Boulder. Swag Boulder is a cool effect that occurs when you press a different direction on the D-pad after pushing a boulder. For whatever reason, the dust particles occur in the direction the character is facing, and not where the boulder is being pushed. This doesn't just look cool, Kevin uses it to manipulate this section of the game, with the extra input being used to find seeds where encounters won't occur, and once we're clear of Victory Road, all that's left is the Elite Four. The only two that give us any trouble are Agatha and the Rival, and both are due to outspeeds, so to mitigate that, we have Agatha's Gengar fail Hypnosis to save frames, and then use an X speed so we can manip one-hit KOs with Fissure and Horn Drill on the rest of her team. The Rival is opened with an X speed so we can one-shot all of his Pokemon, with the Sabrina Red Bar manip paying dividends as we're just 1 HP from being healed out of it. And when the dust settles, we have a final time of 1:29:53. You're likely wondering why this task was just over a minute faster than Aruka's, since it cut out the Rocket Hideout, which is a 6-minute segment alone. The answer is that there is a large difference in the amount of text between the English and Japanese versions, so while Kevin's task skipped an entire section and used instant text, it only saved just over a minute. Despite a new record, there were several sections that Kevin knew he could improve on, so he started work on updating it. In the previous task, he caught a Doduo instead of a Pidgey for Fly, and in this one he routed back to Pidgey since it has a shorter cry, which saves half a second, but the biggest time save came from 4 battles we should look at. The first is the trainer battle in Viridian Forest, and Kevin managed to cut this down by an entire turn. Previously, he had Squirtle do Leer to lower the Weedle's defense, and then 4 crits with unmanipulated damage. For the revised fight, he cut the Leer and manipulated max damage crits instead, which are a 1 in 39 chance. If you combine each of those with the chance to crit and all of Weedle's string shot misses, the odds of getting this fight normally are 1 in 15 trillion, for a total time save of 2 seconds. The other 3 fights are gym battles, Brock, Misty, and Koga, and all have different reasons for their improvements. For Brock, the tackle miss on Onix was changed to a Screech fail since the text is shorter, with that tech getting applied to Route 3 as well. Stat modifying moves in Gen 1 are quite powerful due to how they work, so the developers put a 25% chance to miss on them, which makes manipulating them a lot easier. Misty is an RNG nightmare, and the reroute of the fight manages to save a whopping 3 seconds, with the odds being pushed to the max. Starmie is forced into 3 Gen 1 misses, and 1 crit to get us deep into the red bar. On our side, there are 4 1 in 39 damage attacks, with 3 of them being crits, which puts the odds of this fight to 1 in 100 quadrillion. The biggest time save comes from Koga, and it's all due to the revised PP route, as the previous task lost a turn defeating the first Coughing to conserve Horn Drill PP for the other Pokemon. In the revised route, we still enter the fight with 3 PP and Horn Drill, except this time we use it on the first 3 Pokemon, and then have Weezing Gen 1 miss a self-destruct, while we take an Elixir to fill up on PP, saving 6 seconds. With the battle route changes and some other small optimizations, Kevin managed to save almost 18 seconds over his previous task, and it stood unchallenged for over a year, until a huge paradigm shift started to unfold. This is MrWint, and his curiosity was the progenitor of many different ideas about what could be fast in a task run. His primary assumption was that Nidoran was slow because you had to go out of your way to catch it, so he challenged conventional wisdom and started making a route that used Squirtle exclusively. In the beginning, I said that Squirtle struggled in the late game because his evolutions have problems dealing with battles after Koga, and while this is true for a number of reasons, MrWint had a theory that even with the time loss from taking 2 turns to defeat some Pokemon in the late game, the time you save from not catching Nidoran would be greater. Compared to sticking with Squirtle, catching Nidoran loses a minute and a half up to Mount Moon, which means that the Squirtle route has a huge early lead. As far as the mid-game is concerned, you do the Celadon Gym on the first visit instead of routing it in later, but the issues with Squirtle become apparent around Koga. Nidoking has some very efficient moves, with Thrash being a great powerhouse due to its damage and time saved by not having to select it again. Squirtle isn't so fortunate. It can't learn Thunderbolt, so water Pokemon give it a tough time, and every time it needs to use a second move adds an additional 2 seconds onto the run. Despite all of this, MrWint persevered, and he realized one thing. The run had the potential to be marginally faster than the current Nidoran run. As he finished up the Elite Four, he knew the time was close, and when it clocked in, he was 6.5 seconds ahead of the old Taz. Now that he knew the Nidoking route could be defeated, he started exploring other ideas, but first he wanted to have some fun, and he made a meme run where you pick Charmander. The run was chock full of comedy, like where you fight Brock with Charmander and then deny the evolution into Charmeleon, and meme by meme, the run started shaping up. You're probably wondering why he kept Charmander since Charmeleon is objectively stronger, but she has such a hard time with Misty that the evolution was denied to save time, because we're catching a Pokemon in Mount Moon. Perhaps the biggest meme of the run, a Pokemon that requires a Moonstone to evolve would be caught, but instead of Nidoran, it's Clefairy, and she's evolved into Clefable almost immediately. Clefable has some major upsides. With great stats for an early game Pokemon and the ability to learn Mega Punch, she's a great choice going into Misty. Despite being slightly underleveled, the gym battles go okay, keeping the exact number of turns as the Nidoran route, with Mega Punch having manipulated crits to keep pace. Clefable does run into the same issues as Squirtle eventually. She falls off hard in the late game, but that's where the next twist of this meme run comes in. MrWint catches a Tauros in the Safari Zone. So far, the theme has been that when a Pokemon will encounter difficulty, another is caught to replace it, and you're probably wondering why I'm including a meme run into this task history video, and that's because this route was actually even faster than the Squirtle run. Despite being unoptimized and some liberties being taken for comedic effect, the rotating cast of main Pokemon turned out to be an efficient way of saving time, which left MrWint with one thing to do: make a serious task using this new tech. There was one big assumption the previous tasks had made, and that was that catching new Pokemon wouldn't be worth it due to the time loss from having to catch them. This was assumed for several reasons, and it was never seriously considered as being viable. MrWint's meme task proved this wasn't the case, and on investigation, he found a bunch of reasons as to why it actually saved time. One of the biggest is that you don't need to catch any Pokemon for HM moves, since you can teach them to main Pokemon being cycled out, and of the Pokemon you do catch, they're of sufficient stat level that you don't lose time leveling them. His new route starts with Squirtle, then catches Clefairy, and then Tauros, with significant effort being made to optimize the run over the meme route, so it's time to take a closer look. In the previous runs, battle animations were turned off at the very beginning, but MrWint discovered that the rival fight is faster if they're turned on, since Tackle's animation is faster when they are enabled, so they don't get turned off until after Bulbasaur is defeated. After skipping Nidoran, Squirtle makes quick work of Brock, which means it's time to catch Clefable, and while her moveset lets her learn Bubble Beam and Thunderbolt, the biggest powerhouse is Mega Punch. Clefable is a normal type Pokemon, which means she gets Stab, or same type attack bonus by using normal type moves. This means that any normal type move she uses gets an additional 1.5 multiplier on its damage, which puts just about everything in Mega Punch range. Anything that can survive Mega Punch gets cleaned up once she learns Bubble Beam and Thunderbolt, and in fact, there's nothing beyond Misty that she can't defeat in one hit. The other great thing about Clefable is that she doesn't learn any moves on level up, which saves time over Nidoking as well. For comparison to the Nidoran route, Misty is cleared at 21:21 in Kevin's TAS, with MrWint getting through at 19:32, which just goes to show how much time you can save by not going out of your way to catch Nidoran. It's worth noting that Red Bar doesn't skip level up jingles that occur after the last Pokemon of a battle, and due to the XP route, Clefable does take a few of these, which loses time overall. The other thing of note is the PP route. Since Mega Punch has more PP than Thrash, you don't need to conserve moves as much, which unfortunately means the Hiker self-destruct strat is retired. After Lavender Tower, Clefable starts to run into trouble as her early game stats are eclipsed by the Pokemon that start appearing in battles, which means it's time to catch a Raging Bull. Tauros is very similar to Clefable in two regards. He has great stats for this part of the game, and the stab he gets from Stomp is comparable to Mega Punches. You can see it in action in Koga's gym, as not only does he outspeed Pokemon 3 levels higher than him, he one-shots them. Tauros does have his own PP route issues. While Stomp is a great attack, he is significantly lower level than anything in Koga's gym. And for the last few Pokemon, he needs to use Horn Drill, so we're still forced to have the Weezing pay tribute to the Hiker. He picks up his full moveset in the mansion, with Stomp, Strength, Horn Drill, and Blizzard being put to use. But the big advantage that Tauros brings is his speed stat. Despite being outleveled by everything he encounters, Tauros has such high speed that only a handful of enemies move before him, and there's one fight in particular of note. During the Agatha fight, we need to PP up to be able to finish the later fights, so a Screech is manipulated from the Arbok to spare a turn while we use an Elixir. Except this is the rare occasion where a move is forced to hit that isn't for Red Bar management. Screech affects our defense stat, and due to a quirk of Gen 1, when a stat is modified in battle, the game recalculates that stat based off of the unboosted value, and for whatever reason, it reapplies the badge boost to all other stats, meaning our speed stat is now high enough to outspeed the final Gengar. All that's left is to manage the one-hit KO moves for Lance and the rival, for a final time of 1:28.43. A full 52 seconds faster than the Nidoking route. You may be wondering if the strats MrWint discovered have any viability in RTA runs of the game, and he does address this. Another Pokemon tasser, Gifvex, noted that since RTA manips require a save and reset to set up, it may cost too much time to be worth doing. But if you kept Squirtle until Tauros and skipped Clefable, you might have a shot at being faster. Rather than wait to see if this would pan out in RTA, MrWint made a TAS, and it turns out, it was. Cutting out the Clefable catch saves some time as we no longer have to set it as the active Pokemon, but we do catch a Paris for cut in Mount Moon right in front of the Mega Punch TM, which cancels the item jingle and saves over a second. One of the biggest route changes is getting instant text before Misty, which as I mentioned earlier is faster but wasn't attempted due to the restrictions put on RNG manip while instant text is active. MrWint managed to find a route through the fight despite this difficulty, with a perfect string of crits and misses taking place. Now that you're fighting Misty with instant text, you're not using the center to set your escape rope waypoint until after, which means you need to re-enable instant text. Since we're using Squirtle, this changes the trainer route to Bill, with the top hiker being fought due to his lower XP yield, which prolongs instant text until we learn Bite on the last trainer instead of the second to last trainer. One of the big problems with Squirtle is that he lacks power compared to Clefable, so some Pokemon, like Surge's Raichu, will survive the first attack, which is mitigated slightly by having Bite cause them to flinch. Squirtle just barely edges out Clefable in the early game, being about 13 seconds ahead at Mr. Fuji's house after the Lavender Tower, But that's all the time we need, because Tauros tags in to finish out the route for a final time of 1:28:28, a full 15 seconds ahead of the previous task, and is where the route currently stands today. MrWint's discoveries had a huge impact on the Pokemon task community, with Silver and Gold already getting a new Raticate route, but that's a story for another time. His current route has already had improvements suggested, and discussion among taskers is at an all-time high, so who knows what the future holds. There's just one more strat to look at, and that's subscribing and ringing the bell to manipulate your RNG for seeing the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.